We are going live, and
Great.
we're going to talk about natural relationships because it has been scientifically proven again and again that the number one key element common to happy people is the quality of their relationships. So emotional intelligence plays a huge role in the quality of the relationships. And it's proven that happy people live longer, are more productive, they're more inclined to improve the life of those around them. But Faith Keeter has something very special when it comes to the relationship. She has the natural relationship method. And Faith works with horses to build that natural relationship method. So I'm curious about it. Tell me more.
So thank you so much, Carmen, for inviting me to be here with you today. And the study that you've brought up, it's really an important study because it's one of the longest studies on happiness that's ever been done. And what everyone wants to be at the end of the day, I suspect, we think we want money, or we think we want a partner, or we think we want to look beautiful, or whatever it is. And why do we want those things? Because underneath it all, everyone wants to be happy. So the study was done by Harvard University over the span of 80 years. And that's a long time. And what they found is that the quality of our relationships was the most important factor, even more important than money, which I think maybe come as a surprise to people. Yes, we need money. And even more important, this surprised me, than health. And so what they found is that the quality of the relationships help to buffer people from the hardships of life, because life is a roller coaster ride. And as we all go through it, we're going to face great times, we're going to face tough times. And having those relationships, and they don't have to be a romantic relationship. That's something I really want to specify. Relationships come in many different forms. We have our families, our extended families, our parents, if people have children, friends, neighbors, all of those relationships matter. And so what you brought up a moment ago is that I love horses, and I began studying relationship training with horses. And I didn't intend to link the relationship training with horses to my work as a marriage and family therapist with people. But as I got deeper into the horse training, which is done at liberty a lot of the time, which means take off the bridle, you take off the saddle, you take off all the ropes. And what one of my mentors says is that when you do all those things, you're left with the truth. Does your horse want to be with you or not? Because there's nothing forcing them to be there. All you have at that point is the strength and quality of your relationship. And these skills are so easy to learn, and they translate beautifully to people, because in my work, especially in helping couples, a lot of times people say, I just don't know what to do. And when you come from more of a behavioral angle, which I was trained in clinical psychology with very little behavioral methodology, and it was mostly cognitive, which is about our thinking, and that's important. But this brings in actions and things to actually do and things to say to make relationships better, so that the people in our life, we can say, do you want to be with me or not? And hopefully by learning this method, they will say yes again and again, so that relationships can be happy, healthy, and last a long time.
I think it's amazing that we learn about ourselves much more when we build a relationship with our pet, with the puppy dog or the kitty cat. I have two wonderful kitty cats, which I have a wonderful relationship with them. My kitty cats don't behave like normal kitty cats because I built that relationship, because I have that communication with them. And some people think that this is a little bit out there. But people that have animals and they have pets, they know it takes a while to build that relationship. But horses are amazing. I mean, a lot of people already know about therapy through horses and with horses. And what I know about the horses, that the horse will not let you do anything if you're not in a state, because I teach generating states, right? So when when this is what I like about you, your therapy with horses, because it ties directly into feelfulness, and feelfulness gives me an opportunity to better explain what feelfulness is and what generating a state is, because we do this all day long, and we generate states all day long, but a dog and a cat. A dog, not as much, because a dog is trainable and you tell a dog what to do. And a kitty cat, you can't tell a kitty cat what to do. She'll do what she wants to do when she wants to do it. But a horse is big. A kitty cat, you kind of maneuver, but to get a horse to do something you wanted to do, it takes training, and you have to have all of this equipment, language, which I'm not familiar with. But you've taken many steps further to do this liberty, to free the horse. And therefore, by doing that, you're not telling the horse what to do, but you have to shift into a state of being to communicate with the horse. And then the horse will feel you, feelfulness, that is a language, that's a communication. And then it takes time to build that, because you can communicate with a horse via text or messenger, or so, but this is the most amazing types of of course, relationship with people. It's wonderful to have relationship with people, but building on relationship with a horse, for example, because not a lot of people have horses at home, it pushes you to develop internal skills that then you take home and you apply with your partner or your children.
Absolutely, because one of the biggest things that can be generated through working with horses that can translate over to people is a concept that I call emotional fitness. So we know how easy it is to get frustrated with another person's or being's behavior, right? Mm-hmm. And we can get frustrated with our husbands, we can get frustrated with our wives, or parents can get frustrated with their kids. And I tell you, horses, my grandfather said something really interesting to me several years ago. We're always trying to keep our horses safe. And my grandfather, he grew up on a farm, life on the farm. And he said, horses don't sleep as many hours as people, by far, many few hours. And he said, your horse has like 23 hours, that may not be correct, so don't quote me on that, but your horse has hours and hours and hours of how to just think about or figure out how to get in trouble. and they don't have a whole lot else to do there. So this concept of emotional fitness, it's really important, because humans can get into fight, and we can also get into flight. And horses primarily get into flight, and they get into flight very easily because as a prey animal, they're at risk if they don't. So we can scare our horses, and a lot of people do. And I think what humans maybe don't realize with each other, I guess I'll just call us humans, what people don't realize about with each other is that we can actually scare each other also if we're not aware of our own, I'll use your term, feelfulness. If we aren't feeling kind of what's happening there in the situation, and we just react to whatever it is, we can actually send whoever's around us into a different state. And if we're in a negative state, we can actually influence them into a negative state. So yes, everyone has personal responsibility for how we respond to things. However, we all have a nervous system. And the example that I like to use is if I suddenly go, boom, and I'm hiding around the corner, sure, okay, you're, quote, responsible for your action. But when it's one of these immediate fight or flight responses, maybe I bear some responsibility about it too, if I'm the one that's triggering the fight or flight. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. This is where emotional intelligence training comes in. There's so many. Emotional intelligence comes with a lot of cognitive behavior. So emotional intelligence helps you use the thoughts and the feelings, put them together in a cognitive way and in a feeling way to get better relationships, to be happier at life. And relationships are the hardest thing to do in life. But you're right, it's easiest. See, the human body has a built-in mechanism for defense, and anger, it's a built-in mechanism. We are supposed to have anger, and the amygdala, it's responsible for that. We are gifted. It's a little thingy the size of a green pea, 2 little green peas inside the brain at the end of a hippocampus. That the main role of the amygdala is to help you defend for your life. If a bear chases you, you're gonna run. You're not gonna say, "Oh, look at the cutie bear, let me pet you." If a horse chases you, you're gonna run because you don't know the horse just yet. So the body, the physical body, is gifted with this automatic defense mechanism. But we get so bombarded with the stress of life. We have so many things to do and so little time to do everything that it's so easy to snap into the fight or flight response. So if there is, well, nowadays there's 3 of them: fight, flight, and freeze. So instead of fighting, at least we have 2 other states that we can choose. And by flight and freeze, we disengage from violence. But in a flight mode, this is where a lot of violence happens, right? But we don't need a lot of violence to upset somebody. We can just say something ugly or just snap and have a face. And sometimes it takes 3 seconds to ruin a relationship by a word, a wrong word we said, or just snapping out of that in fight mode. And there are so many techniques to help humans to develop these skills, these internal skills, because when that boo happens, something happens, the body will react. But that's an automatic mechanism. But if we build the skills and then we repeat, repetition is the mother of all skills, then it will be available, the skill will be available for us to not engage in fight, flight, or freeze, but instead we're going to respond mode. We'll go, oh, observe your environment and go, oh, and then you'll know what's the right thing to say, or maybe not to say. Or maybe sometimes you want to smile, sometimes you don't want to smile. You just be there. And my very first, I'm Romanian born, and Romanians are hot-blooded. They fight a lot. There's a lot of flight response. Yeah. And the very first thing I recommend to people to do, it's when you have a heated argument with somebody, don't look them straight in the eye. Look them over here at the nose or at the cheek or somewhere here or somewhere, but not straight in the eye. Why? Well, this is what we do with animals out there in the wild. If you're in a forest all by yourself and an animal chases you, you're not going to look them straight in the eye. You don't do that with dogs. You look them around, because when you look them straight in the eye, it means attack, and they're going to attack. So you're just going to be all mighty powerful, but you want to run. So we do the same with people. And this de-escalates all of the hotness and all of the adrenaline that runs through the body. And then you have fractions of a second to de-escalate to ruining or relationships, just by saying, and listen to what the audience is saying. Unless they're going to physically attack you. If they're going to physically attack you, you have to defend for yourself. That's true. But words, using your words in to communicate, to collaborate, even when we disagree, that's the way to do it.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy you brought this up, because I was hoping that you might give some tips for people about how to stay calm, because that's one of the questions that I get asked all the time is, okay, this is great. I'm supposed to respond instead of react, but how do I do that? And one of the things that you just shared just now is one of those things, which is be very aware of eye contact. And I have to say, Carmen, you're the first person that I've spoken with who's non-horse related that understands or has shared how intense eye contact is a trigger. And it often triggers, if you get intense eye contact with somebody, it's going to very likely trigger that person. And we have phrases in our vernacular, what are you looking at? Well, if you just are talking to, again, a member of your family, and all of a sudden you start feeling stress, or I call it pressure, and then the eye contact gets intense, then all of a sudden we're talking like this, or we're talking like this. And that can just make, especially if you have someone who has, I don't know if I want to call it a lower threshold for energy than you do, but some people are more prone toward fight, like you shared. I don't know if that's a Romanian trait, but you said that that's a familiar thing. And other people are more, that's one of mine, is more inclined toward flight, get me out of here. So we can inadvertently do little things that set the other person off. And this is what I find so amazing about learning through the horses first, and then applying the same methods to people, because people are taught to mask those things. We're taught, don't fight, you're going to get in trouble if you fight. And hey, get back here, I'm talking to you, don't run off. We don't really get a lot of positive reinforcement for any of the natural behaviors that we may do under stress.
See, this is the trouble. Positive reinforcement. This is a key concept, because we grew up, we go in school, kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, school, and all kinds of schools and degrees, and we are even at home. Don't do this. This is wrong. Behave. Be nice. All of that. We are told what not to do, and then when it comes to relationship, and you're supposed to do things. It's like, well, I know what not to do, but I don't know what to do. And then I know I'm feeling something, and I'm going to express my feeling, or I'm going to bottle it up, and neither is good. And a traditional psychotherapy, 90% of it focuses on suppressing emotions. And you suppress something long enough, it's going to explode. So before we get to suppression, if we understand that the amygdala is our gift to save our life, but the amygdala will be triggered when we get angry because we are stressed. In civilization, a lot of technology, a lot of concrete. We're not out there in the wilds without any pressure. We have so many deadlines, so many things to do. So we're going to get upset, right? But if we take a moment to take a breath, like don't look the person straight in the eye, and then take a breath, like just breathe out. Quietly feel the air coming out through the lower lip. It's going to de-escalate you right away. Why? Because the simple breathing technique is going to engage your parasympathetic nervous system. And you're going to generate the alpha brain waves. You're going to release the happy hormones just by a single breath. Now, that is a gift. And this is a simple skill. And a lot of people say, well, there's no sophisticated, there's nothing intelligent about it, about taking a breath and not looking people in the eye. And then I would go, okay, give it a try and see if you can de-escalate quicker and down-regulate yourself and de-escalate the other quicker with other methods in the next 3, 4, 5 seconds. Let me know what's a better way. I might just go on, Faith.
Let me share with you a quick story that speaks exactly to what you're speaking about. So many years ago, when I was actually doing the equine facilitated psychotherapy with people, I had a client come who was a little 9-year-old girl, and she was really having trouble with a tolerance for frustration. So she would get a little frustrated, And when I met her, the story that I was told is that she would go under a desk at school and not come out. And so the more people tried to get her to come out, she would actually say, "Stop looking at me, stop looking at me." And that would make people look at her because she's going, "Stop," and she's under the desk, "Stop looking at me." So apparently one day she grabbed a pair of scissors and kind of pointed them at the people like, "Stop looking at me." And apparently that was the beginning of the idea to have her come and, see some therapy, even though she's just 9 years old. And the very first thing that jumped out at me is she's telling you exactly what she needs. She's telling everybody, "Stop looking at me." So she got overstimulated. She probably got flooded on some level. She goes under a desk, which is very much like going into a little cave, right? And then people are now looking at her, which is increasing her pressure, while, like the word you used, trying to deregulate herself.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that wasn't working. And so I was able to share with people, stop looking at her. And so anyway, when she came out, when I met her, we did the actual horse therapy, which was great because horses can be very frustrating and things can happen. And one day we were out on a trail ride. I would take my clients horseback riding, and we would run into things out on the trail, and those would cause stress. So one day, I always heard that horses might lay down in water, but I'd never seen one do it. It happened to be her own horse that she brought. It was a great big horse, and we were going through a shallow river crossing. It was very hot outside, and that big horse just folded up its front legs and just plopped down in the river, and she got tossed into the water. And my goodness, she was so mad. And I don't blame her a bit, because if you've ever been on a horse and all of a sudden they go down and you fall with them, it is actually very, very scary. So she was upset, rightly so. I could see right away that she was okay, so I would have been upset. But she just got mad. But we were out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, not totally nowhere, but it wasn't like she could just go do something. So we just waited, and then she was able, when she was ready to get back on, we rode back and everything was fine. And one of the things that I do differently, and this is where some people may not agree with me, but I have a term I called correct and continue. So once she was able to get back on the horse, she was now in a correct state and she was fine. So I did not see any need to go backwards and talk to her about her bad behavior. Well, I won't call that bad behavior, but let's say going under the desk at school, as someone might want to talk to her about that, because what she was able to do, given the space to do it, was deregulate herself and get right back on track. Me bringing it back up potentially would have got her off track.
Correct.
Back into that state.
Yes.
So one day I had the most amazing thing happen. I got this call from her teacher, and normally I don't get calls from teachers at all. And they said, "Hey, this person was at school today. She had a meltdown and she stomped off." And I was like, okay, and they said, but then the most amazing thing happened. She came back and she said, "Miss So-and-so, I want to apologize for my behavior. From now on, you can count on me to whatever it is, do better." And she goes, "How did you teach her to do that?" And I said, "I didn't teach her to do that, but I set up the environment to allow it to happen so that she could discover it for herself. And then that is what we practiced over and over and over and over again. And once she learned how to do it, she was able to then transfer it to other areas in her life. And that's what for me is so exciting about this work, is this is not about horses. People get excited, "Oh, it's about horses." We use the horses, but it's about people. It's for people, about people.
Yes, that's amazing. And for the little bit that you told me about the story and engagement with her, when she fell off the horse, when they went into the water and she fell off the horse, the horse kneeled down, that told her the horse wasn't reliable. And it showed her because it pretty much he went under the table, something that she does. She kneels down when she goes under the table. So she saw firsthand zero words, zero intellectuality, zero teaching anything. She saw how unreliable the horse was when the horse went down, and what happened to her. She got hurt. So all of this happened very quickly in her subconscious. And experience, when we have an experience, that will stay with you for a very long time, possibly forever. And this is what hypnotherapy does. And this is what feelfulness training does as well. We create an experience. And when you have the experience, when you feel what you feel during the experience, you don't need a whole lot of intellectuality, a whole lot of reasoning of why that happens and why you need to do. And just like you said, you didn't need to go back to correct her of what was, because she's got it. Just the fact that she saw, oh, that was unreliable. Maybe that's what I do when I go under the desk. Therefore, she went to the teacher and said, you can rely on me. So that's amazing. And this is a big deal. And she's a child, right? Wow, good job.
Well, thank you. And Carmen, I didn't even think about that. So that's one of the things I love about talking with you is you come from a different perspective than I do. And I always learn more things whenever we talk.
Yes, I'm very experience oriented. Yeah.
I was hoping you could share a little bit more about the concept of feelfulness, because that's a term that I know that you're very familiar with. But until we were talking about it the other day, that is something that I hadn't heard before. And I was wondering if you could just maybe share a little bit about where that term came from or what it means, how it came to be, just so that people viewing could understand that a little bit more.
Feelfulness is a term that I coined back in 2011. So I invented the term. I have not heard or seen any other person using this term before I coined it in 2011. If somebody else has done it and I don't know about it, I cannot speak for that. But feelfulness, it's a term that needed to be put out there. Before 2011, I've stumbled upon these techniques, this behavior, through the experience. And I developed this thought feeling practices. And you take a thought and you couple with a feeling and you do a practice to have an experience. And first you downregulate, but after a while you don't know how to generate a state, right? And mindfulness is not sufficient to describe these techniques because, there's many reasons. But it's not just the mind, it's the thought and the feelings that they are always, always together. And it is how we feel that affects our life, and we make decisions based on how we feel. Well, a lot of decisions, we can make a lot of rational decisions, but even that, thoughts and feelings are never separate. We might pay more attention to thoughts and pay more attention to feelings. But feelings are different than emotions. Yeah, and this is what emotional intelligence training and emotional intelligence techniques and practices come in handy to teach you. The range teaches you a lot of emotion, but emotional intelligence, it's all about thought, feelings. But even emotional intelligence can go a bit on an academic side, a bit on a rational side. And here are the points, and this is the scale, and this is what you need to reach, and this is what you need to attain to have emotional intelligence. And it can take a while, and some people may be not intimidated, but not have time for it. And then you can still go. And some people, it's hard to understand emotions that you don't know that you've experienced. It's difficult because a lot of people go intellectual about it. They use their thought processes, and this is a long way. But if you, with feelfulness, you create an experience, right? And you create an experience, and that experience, it's going to register into your muscle memory, into your automatic habit mechanism. Why? Because of the gift of neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is just such a gift. The brain is not, it's malleable. And actually, it's not the brain, it's the mind. And the most flexible part of your body is the mind, right? And your brain is not the mind. And your mind is not the brain. You use your brain. Brain is a tool. So through experience, and this can be done through workshop, and hypnotherapy is very good of creating. This is what hypnotherapy does. It creates an experience. Fearfulness is just, we all do it. We're not aware that we do it. But if we go about learning some of the practices, thought feeling practices, for the purpose of fearfulness, you will automatically elevate your emotional intelligence. You will automatically learn to downregulate. There's so many good side effects that normally would take a long term in traditional therapy. But the most amazing thing that happens with fearfulness is that you learn how to feel a feeling by choice. Right?
That's amazing.
It is amazing because mindfulness teaches you how to kind of monitor, regulate your thoughts, thought management, manage your stream of thoughts. Well, it's not so easy. But what I do in fearfulness, I help you. I take you through different layers of thought. I help you identify layers of thought first, cognitively, so then you can kind of have a reference point to it, and then this, it's also it's also motivational. It's evocative and motivational, and it influences you. It gives you a little bit of motivation and influence. Create, motivate, influence. That's the subtitle of my book, Feelfulness. And then when you know how to have lesser, busier thoughts, and it's not by quieting your mind, because I give you things to think through and of. I occupy your thoughts in a direction for your parasympathetic system to come charge in, to downregulate, to give you all the happy hormones. And in 20 minutes of an exercise, if you allow it, you can feel like you had a vacation for 2 weeks. It is so powerful. And after a while, you begin to learn how to feel a feeling by choice. And it's a big deal, and it's wonderful. And once we feel this feeling by choice, and we go to a variety of them. I work with word triangles, and there's many of them, and there's specific ones, and there's a base, and then there's level 1 and level 2 and level 3, and all that, like kindergarten and school and college and all that. But once you learn how to do that, then you generate a state, like from here, feeling all, then you generate a state. And you make that available to the person in front of you, especially if you're a practitioner, if you're a coach, if you're a therapist, a coach, a teacher, a manager, a leader. If you work with people and you, especially if you want to uplift them, because something magical happens at the subconscious level, and you do this with horses. You do feelfulness with horses in a different manner, of course. And you see what happens at the subconscious level to the girl you talked about when the horse knee down and then she fell off the horse. Yeah. She learned how to generate a state right from there, from that experience. That's a whole bunch of feelfulness that went through it. And it took, how long it took? It took one session of experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when we learn to generate a state, we can make that available to the person in front of us. And working with horses, it will definitely teach you how to do that in on a feeling level, not on a rational level, on a thought feeling, on an emotional intelligence level. But we can do that with cognition, with words, but not in a rational way, because feelings are not, well, emotions are never rational, but we are gifted with emotion, and we have the power to transform emotions into feelings, because feelings we can use. Emotions can go all kinds of wrong way.
Maybe you could share the difference between feelings and emotions, because I think a lot of people use those two words interchangeably. And if you wanted to make the distinction between the two, that might be really helpful.
Yes, I mean, feeling, you can feel hungry. It's time to eat, and you have a feeling in your stomach, and maybe a gargle, maybe not a gargle, but you have a feeling, so you go eat. You engage in an action. You had a feeling, a sensation in your body, you engage in an action, right? And then you might feel thirsty. You go have a glass of water. That's a feeling, a sensation, right? Or you might feel sleepy. You go to sleep. Or okay, not there yet. Or when we have an emotion will create a feeling. It will create a sensation in a body, right? And then because we're so we're conditioned to react to those sensations. You're hungry, you eat, you're thirsty, you drink water, you sleep, you go to sleep. You need to empty your bowels, your bladder, all of that is all sensations. Then when we have an emotion that it might be too emotional, right? Then we react because we have a sensation in the body, right? So once we become aware of it and we learn a few techniques, because I will occupy your thoughts. When you have an emotion, you will learn to occupy your thoughts with something that will first downregulate you and take care of that emotional space that is in between the people. Oh, that can be very, very dense. I mean, sometimes you can just cut it with a sword. And then you can manage you can generate a feeling. So it's all emotional intelligence, emotional fitness. It's all therapeutic all at once. And this, people can go to therapy, the regular psychotherapy for 20 years, and they still do not accomplish what Feelfulness will accomplish in 3 months or 6 months.
That's really incredible. So what I'm hearing you say is that the difference between feelings and emotions, and you can correct me if I didn't get this right, but I'm hearing you say that feelings are a physical sensation in your body, like feeling temperature with water on your hand, and you feel that in your body. And a lot of times those will signal you toward different things. Whereas emotions are things that we call mad, sad, frustrated. And those are things that when we begin to experience those emotions, those will actually trigger different feelings in the body, like sick to your stomach and, and anxiety. So these emotions, by learning how to down regulate those or use them to your benefit, you can really have a better outcome. And so one of the things that I like to say is that there really are no good or bad emotions.
Correct.
There are only productive ways to respond to them or non-productive ways, and that every emotion is there as some kind of a signal. Now, the tricky thing is some people will say, and a lot of people use the feelings interchangeably. So a lot of people will say, always trust your feelings. And I say, careful, notice the feeling and then check it out. But there's a difference between a fact and an interpretation. And so two people could be in the exact same situation, or one person, this happens in couples all the time. One person has an intention, and maybe their intention is good and they're trying to do something well. And then the other one reads something else into it that may or may not even be there. And then projects that that person was trying to upset them or trying to be difficult. And so they may have a feeling, and the feeling is, or I'm going to call it now, I'm saying the wrong word. They may have an emotion, and the emotion is valid that they're experiencing it, but it doesn't always mean that the interpretation that's being made is correct. So that's one of the things I like about the natural relationships training, is it teaches people how to understand some behaviors that are natural in each other. And like one of them we brought up in the very beginning was flight, and sometimes people will leave. Well, that's always a good thing to do if you don't have another idea about what to do. It's always better to do that than to like engage into a really bad fight. However, the act of leaving, if we don't say to that person, I'm coming back, it's just one little sentence. Remember Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back. It can trigger an abandonment issue in the other person that they may not even know that they're having. It can trigger separation anxiety that's very real, because people are mammals. And if we get in a situation with somebody and then they storm off, even if we're not intending to think about it logically that, oh my gosh, they may never come back, it can actually make a person feel like they may never come back. And then the next thing you know, they're blowing up the cell phone and they're texting, trying to regain the contact, because for mammals, togetherness is natural. But if you know that togetherness is natural, then if somebody needs to depart and if they forget to say, I'm coming back, it can help the other person just like sit tight and just kind of let it be and let it kind of take place naturally, that over time, most of the time, not always, occasionally the last fight will be the last fight, or the next fight will be the last fight, but that's more the exception than the rule. And so if we can just calm down and stop exacerbating the situation, then it allows that person to come on back, which is what most people are actually naturally drawn to do. And so when people know that, it can really help to, like you said, de-escalate or deregulate the nervous system and bring everything back to like a homeostasis where everybody's better.
Definitely. And one of the quick way for people to do that, I recommend to my clients, just go to the bathroom.
That's funny because I do the same thing.
I'll be back. Just go to the bathroom. You can't argue with it. I mean, yeah, but at least you have 3 minutes to just breathe out and use the tools that I'm giving you for the thought feelings. So I'll give you some geometry to work with, and it's going to take your attention. It's going to divert your attention. So it will make more room for you to choose the next thought and the next appropriate action. And yeah, it's important to say definitely that I'll be back. But what you said about feelings, there is another aspect to feeling, that is the knowingness. When you know something, it's a feeling about it. And your gut feeling, it's that knowingness. And the gut feeling is also your intuition. And a lot of people place heavy role under intuition. Is very important because that's your internal knowingness and that's your internal language. And this is actually something that can be expanded, that it can be built and it can be worked into it. And feelfulness will develop into a language that is knowingness and sensation. Certain words, when I work with word triangle, certain words, when you begin to feel the words, they have a direction in your body. There is a sensation in your body that has a direction and a shape. Some are horizontal, some are vertical, some are round, some are straight, some are directional. And when I bring this out to people, a lot of people go, huh? I never thought about it. And I go, well, no, because I came up with it because it's geometry related. That's something very simple, that we know lines, we know straight lines, and we know curved, and we know circles. And I make sure to tie this information into something that's very, very simple. which is significant too. And I also work with the four direction, the east, west, north, south, and I timed the four elements as Plato did back there in a day. And the simplicity of those elements, it makes room for people to have the experience, as opposed to beating themselves up or beating the other up, whether it's right or wrong. Because right and wrong exist, but not all the time. Most of the time, we have a lot of gradients, right? And the right and the wrong is two sides of the same coin, right? But there is appropriateness, and especially in relationships, you might feel right about feeling hurt and needing to express and tell the others what they've done wrong to hurt you and discipline them and give them ultimatums. If you continue to do this, then that, right? But is it appropriate to do that in that particular circumstance? Are the children around you and seeing what you're doing? Is this what you want to model for your children? Yeah. Even if the pets are around, you could see that when you get into the city, the pets are just going to go away. I mean, sometimes I get frustrated with the technology on a computer, and I breathe through it. My kitty cats, they run away. And then I recognize, like, oh, I breathed a little too loud, right? But having the knowledge and having the opportunity to have the experience in an appropriate way and still express those emotions in an emotionally intelligent way, definitely with empathy. I mean, your emotions are important, but the other person's emotions are equally as important, and maybe even more if the other person is going through an illness, right? It's important. It's definitely very important.
Yes, absolutely. So I really like what you were talking about right there. And one of the things that I like to think about is when it comes to emotional intelligence, not everyone has the same understanding of it. When you talked about the feelfulness and the mindfulness. And so sometimes we can think that the other party is working on the same kind of understandings that we are. And when we do that, we can make assumptions about that person. Or like you said, a person can turn it around and make judgments about themselves, and then negative judgments, harsh judgments can start to create, feeling of shame or guilt. And one of the things that I say to people all the time, when in terms of relationships and in terms of emotional intelligence, the topics that we're talking about today, I find that most of us are not formally taught any of this stuff.
No, you are correct. We are not. Emotional intelligence is it's a relatively new development. It started in about 1990 as a subject, as an area, as a discipline. I'm not sure I can call it discipline. And before that, there were individual therapy. There was cognitive behavior therapy. There were language therapy and other cognitive methods, and people made good progress to that. But through the acceleration of consciousness, emotional intelligence is so needed because of the relationships and because of civilization and because we need to work together and accomplish a goal together. We have to develop certain skills, and we have seen up until emotional intelligence developed, we have seen how much destruction and how much ill we can do with plain emotions and with unregulated emotion, with just exploding emotion, all of the violence and the crimes and the all the ugliness. I don't even want to think about it. So emotional intelligence, it was something that needed to develop as a science. Because data was there already, the experiences were there already, but then how do you go about it to teach it? And then even science has made research over the amygdala. I mean, the amygdala, it's a gift. We're supposed to have the amygdala triggered as a stress response. But not everything is a stress. I mean, not every stress it's a save your life type of a stress, right? So the researchers have had people under fMRI and pessimist people all kinds of people. They were had to look at the same images, and people that are prone towards pessimism, their amygdala would light up with the negative images, and the same images for the optimist people, their amygdala would not light up right away. Why? Because of the emotional intelligence. Happier people, emotionally intelligent people are naturally happier. They know how to separate, how to stay, and how not to engage in every single emotion if the emotion is not productive, if the emotion is not going to lead to an achievable outcome. So for the emotion to lead to an achievable outcome, it needs to be turned into a feeling. And then you take the feeling and couple it with a thought and make a triangle, and then voila, here's what you create, right? But it's quite amazing to have this research done under the fMRI and see how the amygdala responds. And it is true that some people are born with a shorter fuse, and some are born with a longer fuse, and that's all right. But throwing your emotions on someone all the time, that's a very low level of emotional intelligence. And criticism, it's right there at the bottom, and people still engage in a lot of criticism. And in order to stay away from that, you need to look at both sides of the coin, because it's the same coin.
Right. And one of the things that you just brought up about the criticism, the very first book that I ever wrote is called The Conflict Pattern Revealed, because there are at least 13 different terms that people use, things that we say to one another, like criticizing, you are blank, that can alert someone that whoever is using those terms, now here's a different way to look at it, is likely under pressure. And I coined a term called the gauntlet. And so I named all of those words the gauntlet, because it's like running a gauntlet, trying to get through a conversation. If you're feeling like you're getting emotionally beat up, or it's just like bam, 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 and you can hardly say anything without the criticism or the contradiction, that's not true. I never said that. So by having terms for these different things, what can happen is it can alert someone that they're occurring. So especially you statements, you are trying to make me mad. Well, maybe you are, right? But if I'm concerned about that, I could ask you, are you trying to make me mad? And so what you brought up is just a really important thing, because there are methods through the chaos if people know what they are. And so that's one of the things that's really been an important thing to me. The very first course that I ever put together is actually called Never Fight Again. And I really thought about the title carefully. I thought, am I just making this claim that is just too far-fetched? Because I don't like that when people do that. I don't like this whole, that far-fetched kind of claims that people make, especially these days. But when a person understands what not to do, which you've talked about, we're often told, don't do this, don't do that. But when we're taught what to do instead, then it doesn't mean we're never going to have disagreements about things. And it doesn't mean that we're always going to see things the same way. But as far as having big, bad, ugly fights, especially with the people we love and care about, no, we really don't have to fight anymore. But some tools and skills are required, like setting boundaries. So when you talked about how we can get an emotion and then create a feeling, and then we can have a big burst. Well, nobody around that has to stay in the environment of that person. I mean, I suppose if we're like locked in prison, which actually I taught courses in prison for 6 years where people really were restricted in their environments, and what they shared with me, what the inmates shared with me, is that learning these skills, which was intended to help them in long distance relationships with their family, to help reduce recidivism rates and to stop the cycle of dad goes to prison, because this was an all men's prison, and then their son might follow in dad's footsteps as modeling and then end up there himself. So what I heard from my students is that the tools they were learning not only did help them in their long distance relationships with their families, but they were seeing things begin to change between themselves out on the yard. Because I was there for 6 years, and I don't know how many students I was actually able to interact with, but a lot. My course had a waiting list for the entire time it was there. And so as more and more people began to get the training and learn the tools and be able to down regulate instead of just react and escalate, things were starting to calm down on all levels, which actually made the environment better for everybody. And I really care about that. That's one of the things that I really want to see happen in this world. I know that marriages are not always, not everybody is in a situation where that is a place that's good for them or making them happy. And sometimes relationships do need to change. So I always like to say, if you have children together, the relationship really isn't going to end. It's going to change because you're still going to be in contact with this person on some level if you have children together. But what I don't want to see happen anymore, and what really, really makes me sad, is when people love each other, and they absolutely do, and they're both trying their guts out, trying to make this relationship work, but they don't have the tools because they were never taught the tools. And so I believe that people are doing the best they can with the skills they have. And those situations where people are leaving as a last resort because they don't know what else to do. They're just unhappy, they're having conflict, things are blowing up, and they get tired. So that's really important to me. And that's, I guess I'm on a mission to work on making sure that if relationships end or change, that it's because that's actually what that person truly wants deep down, rather than I'm dying inside because this isn't what I really want, but I don't know what else to do.
That's wonderful, and it's very important, because through this process, each person begins to learn more about themselves. And one of the things that I do in my coaching, and I also do it through hypnosis to recurrent hypnosis clients, is I work on the self, and every troubles that arrive is because of the self. And the self is very complex. And when people get in an argument, or when they go, I don't want to get into the violence, it's just too sad. So when people get upset and they get into an argument, is because something about the self has been put down or minimized or overlooked or unacknowledged. And a lot of this creates triggers. Well, what are triggers? Triggers are merely experiences that this person has experienced over and over and over again, and it's sick and tired of it because this person has been put down and has been minimized, right? Or this person has a medical condition, has an illness that they do the best they can to work with it, or they have an illness that hasn't been diagnosed, that they don't know why they have all of these sensations and feelings in their body. So when I work with the self, I particularly work on building the self up. And I stay away from working with narcissists. I do not like working with narcissists. But when I see what this does to people feeling like they have no choices, and when I see how they flourish, they blossom just after 3 months, in 3 months, I can put a person back together, given they don't have a lot of illnesses, given they don't have an abusive relationship at home. It is one of the most wonderful things. And a lot of people misinterpret the ego as being the bad guy. Well, there are parts of us that need to be better managed, and we need to have more empathy and elevate our emotional intelligence. But what I teach about the ego, a lot of people are surprised. And this takes me back to William James, the father of functional psychology. I'm all about function, all about behavior and function. So William James is the father of functional psychology, and he was able to layer the self in first into two separate different layers, the I self and the me self. So only if you begin to think about, oh, there is an I self and there is a me self. Yeah, well, no, this is not going to be a personality disorder unless you have a personality disorder. There's duality, it's always there. You have two hands, you have two eyes, 2 ears, two sides of the brain, two eyebrows, two lips, two kidneys, there's always two lungs, there's always two, right? So when you begin to think in these terms, you just go, oh, that's all it takes at the beginning to just go, oh. And then William James goes further and takes other level into the material self, the spiritual self, and the ego, right? And then there's many other layers to it. So what I do in my practice in teaching and training and hypnotherapy, I use something very simple that people know and use it all the time, the 4 elements. I use north, south, east, west. And I apply the elements to it, something that has been done, Plato, and before Plato has been done, I forgot who added the elements to, maybe Hippocrates. I think Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, assigned the elements to the 4 direction. The West is associated with the earth, the South with emotions, the East with the fire, and the North with the wind. And then all of these elements, there is a behavior to them. There's an automatic behavior. The water behaves in a certain way. The wind behaves the fire behaves in a certain way. The earth behaves in a certain way. So when I bring these aspects in, and we take whatever we're working on and we take a look, and is this behavior more like the water, or is it more like the water, or is it more like the air? Then people go, oh, I never thought about it this way. Well, that's why you're here. And that's why you're reaping the benefits, because there is no right and wrong that way. But then when these elements combine, right, you add fire to the water can boil. So in an argument, when we have an argument, emotions are more like water, but sometimes they can be like fire. So if you're in a heat of an argument and the emotions are boiling, if you add more fire to it, you're gonna get a lot of steam. And then the steam, what happens to the water on earth when it turns into steam? It goes up into the sky, forms clouds, and then we get rain, and sometimes we get tornado. Why? Too many emotions have gone down out there, and then it creates a lot of weather we don't like. So when I take these simple elements into with the clients, they just go, oh, I like this. So it's not just metaphors, it's how things work, function. What is the mechanism? And once people understand the mechanism, then they can do something about it. And then I take that into the self. Everybody has their four parts, and then they have the center, right? So all of these elements, they're not separate, but we can be out of balance. We can be too emotional, or we can too much in the water or too much in the air. When we're too much in the air, it's just thinking, and nothing else. So in my courses, I made this image where I take the air and the water and the thoughts and the feelings, and I bring them together and have the behavior of the practice as a thought feeling practice. And then this kind of sticks better with people when they understand as a thought feeling. Why? You know, the emotion is still there. Emotion is not going to go away, but we transform it. The thoughts are still going to be there, but you can choose. You take your thoughts down, you take your feelings up, meaning the emotions kind of, run with the water on the water's course. But and then with the behavior, with the earth and with the fire, you behave it, you transform it into something. Earth itself, it's a behavior as an extension of the Big Bang, right? It's a materialized behavior, right? So it brings a lot of simpleness, and these are things that people can actually take home and use. And I work on relationships indirectly when I'm working with, I get mostly wives, overwhelmed mothers, and they come back to me and they say, well, this evening, everything went fine. I followed the processes, and I didn't go into an argument. And my husband was amazed, and he expected me to be upset and angry and to bite his head off. And actually, I was able to control my feelings the very first time in my life. And I go, wow, thank you. And this is an overwhelmed mother with children at home, with helping her mother out, with a very good husband. She's a very good person. It's just tired and overwhelmed. So here are a few techniques. Do this geometry. Go to the bathroom. Go to the bathroom. What do you do when you go to the bathroom? A lot of people go, huh? Well, that's what I do. Well, in addition to that, you can use your thoughts to do this, to de-escalate, and then all of a sudden you step out the brain, almost a different person. You're not about to explode. And to have this feedback come back, it's priceless. I mean, I could do this even in my next lifetime.
Yeah, it's a really great feeling, isn't it, to make somebody else's day a little bit better and make somebody else's life a little bit easier, even in that moment, because life is not always so easy. And when people are struggling, I know I've been there before, it really helps to have some guidance and direction and some tools. So I really like what you said about bringing nature into your work, because we use nature right in our vocabulary. We call it human what? Nature.
Why?
Human nature is our human nature.
Neuro language, right there, neuro language.
It's right there in the language. But again, because so many of us haven't actually been taught what that means, and things that are instinctive and natural for people, we can read into things and misunderstand, and all of a sudden label normal behavior as bad or wrong. And that
Especially
doesn't
in a
mean,
civilized, especially in highly civilized geographical areas. Some countries are more civilized in certain larger cities. But if you look at behavior in people that live in a rural area, they don't have as much fight or flight response. They are in harmony with nature, and it's life is different. And that's why you're so successful with working with the horses, because it's all nature, and nature has its own mechanism. And if you learn the mechanism, then you gain power. You learn about your nature. And every human has its own, has a general nature, has a human nature, but then everybody has their own unique individual processes about that nature. Some people like the rain, some people don't like the rain. Some people like the snow, some people never seen snow. I mean,
and
what do you mean you never seen snow? But I've met people that never seen snow, and they looked at snow and they wanted to hush it. They wanted to move it.
well, I've
It was
never,
the funniest thing I ever heard. But then it got me to realize that, wait a minute. I mean, I grew up with snow all of my life, but I've never met someone from Australia, for example, that had never seen snow. So that I found it interesting, and it puts things in perspective. You take that into behavior and into development and into yourself, into a relationship. It's like, oh, all right. So someone doesn't know what snow looks like.
and I've never heard that about location, making a difference about people's ability to cope with the environment. But what I will say is that everyone has to cope with some kind of an environment. And so one of the things that I think is so really good to just know is that these skills are learnable. They can be taught. We've learned everything else we have in our life, other than, I believe, the things that babies know how to do is like cry, right out the get-go. And very quickly they learn to smile. And these are things that are there for them to get their needs met. And getting our needs met, it's important. And even the learning that your needs are okay. Some people, I remember giving a talk one time, and there was a man that at the end of the workshop, it was his girlfriend was my friend, and she came up to me and said, the talk was so, so helpful. Thank you so much. My boyfriend went out on the lunch break. He's a 50-year-old man. She said he went out on the lunch break. He went to his truck and he cried. Now, this
Good.
was not a real in touch with his feelings kind of, I don't know how to say that. I think that everybody, has feelings, but this man was more of the kind to push them away. And when I spoke with him later, what he shared, which was so profound to me, he said, as a man, I've had this belief my whole life for 50 years that it was my responsibility to look out for other people's feelings. I wasn't supposed to hurt anybody's feelings, which hopefully we don't, but sometimes we do. And I was supposed to take care of other people, but I wasn't ever supposed to need anything myself. And that
Wow.
if I needed something, it was bad or it was wrong. And I've lived under this judgment and shame like my whole life. And when you said needs don't make you needy, they make you natural, he said it just hit him so hard that he just went out to his truck and he cried. And so the way we go about getting those needs met could become needy if we're looking to only one source for that. We have a whole wide world out there and a lot of different ways to get our needs met. But when it comes to the needs themselves, those things are valid, and a person shouldn't feel ashamed for the fact that we need to feel safe. We need to feel heard. We need to belong. We need to have some certainty in our life. We need to have some fun, right? The hierarchy of needs. Those things are real, and it's okay to ask for our needs to be met. And there are also ways to ask that are more effective than other ways. And all of these things can be practiced, taught, and retained once there's enough repetition to make it a habit.
Yes, that definitely. And once an experience is created, because you create an experience with the thought and the feelings. And in my experience, I participated in a lot of workshops, and there were a lot of things brought up to me similar to this gentleman that you mentioned. And a provider in a family has a burden. and sometimes women are providers, and sometimes immigrants, they continue providing for those left in a homeland. So you don't have to be just the head of the family to have the burden of the provider. And only to become aware that you want to provide and it's good, but it's also hard for you, and sometimes you might need a hug or at least recognition. It helps. It definitely helps. A while back, I had a few webinars on basic human needs, and especially the immigrants' basic human needs. They get to take it from the start again on the 5 levels of the basic human needs. Only the first level remains, the biological level. You need to breathe, you need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to excrete, and that's biological level. But then the second level, where we need to have safety and shelter for an immigrant, for example, they have to start over again, and that it's hard. So once I got some fellow Romanians to understand this, they just went, oh. So once they've accomplished that level, then it takes a while to come back to self-actualization and all others, and the need for belonging. And when all of this are put into a perspective, then they can go, oh, okay, then I can do something about it. And then when you take this needs to the self or to the relationship, which the self is in a relationship, some people place more value over their biological needs: eat, drink, sleep, eliminate, interact physically. And other people place more value over their intellectual thought feelings, intellectual, emotional part of themselves. So in a relationship, it's this needs to be well observed. You kind of observe it over the time, but sometimes you kind of get sick and tired. Yes, it's just the physical body. Well, I just want to have a conversation. I can have an intellectual conversation with you. So you kind of learn to give and take, what's more valuable and for that particular person. Yeah.
Well, it's been so nice talking today. And so how do you feel about sharing with people how they can get more information about Feelfulness and what it is that you do, in case they'd like to be in touch with you?
Well, Feelfulness, it's more targeted for practitioners and coaches, and I can be found at feelfulness.org. And my other site for hypnotherapy is at creatingease, EASE.org, because through Feelfulness, we get to create ease, that flow state that we all are looking for. And how do we get to contact you with your wonderful natural relationships?
So if anyone would like to be in touch with me, my website is Natural Relationships, because I found that to be an easy thing to remember. Also, if you happen to remember my name, you can put in faithdieter.com, and that goes to the exact same place. So either way works for me.
All right. Very good. So this was beautiful. And thank you, everybody, for participating. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Carmen.